Greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to another entry here, in case you're looking for something to watch this week. Now, for you new people, I just like to make these videos about films I enjoy and want to share. No deep dives or investigative dissection of the films for the most part, just, I like this, maybe you will too. And while I focus mainly on films I enjoy rather than bashing the ones that I hate, none of these are perfect. Every film has issues. But the overall thought is, did I enjoy it? And that's where this one comes, which is for a film which is a more recent release titled Dark Match from 2024, which just hit Shudder. Now, this is a wrestling-centered film starring Aisha Issa, who I only really know from an episode of Reginald the Vampire, but she's been around a while, both in acting and stunts, and of course, that stunt work definitely helps her with this role as a wrestler. It also stars, among others, Stephen Ogg, who you may know from The Walking Dead, as well as wrestler Chris Jericho, who, aside from his wrestling, has been showing up in a lot of horror films. He's a big horror fan, and what I remember him from most in that area is showing up in Terrifier 2 and Terrifier 3. Now, the synopsis for this film is as follows. A small-time wrestling company accepts a well-paying gig in a backwoods town only to learn too late that the community is run by a mysterious cult leader with devious plans for their match. Now, as usual, I will avoid spoilers and just kind of give my overall presentation about what I liked about this film, so if it sounds interesting, you can check it out. But I will also put up this a little later, as there are some spoilery aspects that I may want to mention. So, wrestling. I'm not really a wrestling fan. I've seen a fair bit of it in the late 90s, never really got into it. Most of my knowledge comes by the way of a roommate that I used to have back then who had been watching it for most of his life. He would kind of fill me in and feed me info about some of these matches as we're watching them. Kind of like somebody giving you background to catch up on a soap opera, which is as best as I can describe what wrestling means to somebody, from the outside of the fandom, such as myself. This soap opera stunt spectacular in a way. It's live, it's energetic, really crazy stunts going on, and something which, though not my thing, I completely understand why it has a fan base it does, why people follow these wrestlers and their characters and their matches for years, for their entire lives, such as my friend does. Now, with that being said, just keep in mind that I say this as this film can be a lot of fun and enjoyed by somebody who is not that much of a wrestling fan. Now, as the synopsis says, this is all about this match in the middle of nowhere. We get a nice introduction of this small-time kind of a wrestling company and the wrestlers within, a bit about their characters and their associations with each other, and that things aren't really going that well for our lead, the one played by Aisha Issa, who's never really won a championship, and she just gets this feeling like maybe her time in this field is just over. But this opportunity comes up, lots of money for this private event. This is a way for their producer to kind of smooth things over with the crew and everybody involved, giving them this opportunity, and most importantly, a much bigger payment for everybody involved. Now, our introduction is very quick, very effective, and we are on the road with our heels. Best explanation that I was given years back is being kind of like the bad guys of whatever story they're working on, getting separated from our heroes, causing them to be late. But for their arrival, things are not too bad. It's snowy, it's dark, it's secluded, but they have a very warm welcome as they are ushered not into a hotel, but like a large compound of sorts where there's this huge blowout party happening in which they are allowed to attend and mingle with the fans, of which there are many. Now, it becomes obvious throughout this party that something strange is afoot. Some sort of possible drugging seems to be happening. There's a lot of diversions. One of the guys seems to recognize and have concerns about this guy in charge, played by Chris Jericho. And there's some odd behavior and little mumblings happening from some of the attendees there. So wrestlers are kind of picking up. But it's not so much that it couldn't just be shaken off by several who are there. At least up to that point where there's simply being some small concerns, but nothing major, something strange is going on, but let's just do the job, get paid, and leave. And of course, as the audience, though, knowing the synopsis and that this is a horror film, we know something bad is coming. And that is where these matches are, each one being themed differently. We've got wind, water, earth, fire, and spirit, whatever that will end up being. All these matches throughout it, which go as dangerously and as violently as one would expect, as these matches are set to produce a sacrifice for each round. For each theme and each element, we get a sacrifice. Now, this quickly turns from stunt performances to actual violence And it's pretty intense yet entertaining, as it is in, this theme of wrestling the entire time. Now, and that is like the main meat of this film. People getting killed off, some sort of weird ritual, this religious cult, who will survive and how. Now, there are a few very small issues that I have with this one, which I'll go into in a moment after kind of wrapping up the non-spoiler stuff. But all in all, I will say, even if you're not a wrestling fan, this one is quite enjoyable. It's shot just beautifully, it is tense, violent, and you genuinely care about these characters and want to see the outcome. We're also only a shade over like 95 minutes. It moves at a fast pace, having our intro, travel, arrival, matches, violent climax, and an ending kind of speed by at a really great pace. And all in all, it's worth checking out. But, there are a few small things to kind of point out here. So if you're worried about any spoilers, and the film sounds interesting, head on over to Shudder or AMC Plus or Paid Rental to check it out and then come back here, or just forward to the end until you don't see that little spoiler thing up here. But here we go with the spoilers, if there's any issues with those. So let me just put up this little banner here, because there's just a few items that stick out. So like I said, this is not a perfect film. Our lead, Misbehave, is great, but unless I missed some dialogue somewhere, she seemed to perform her kill a little too quickly and easily. Not in the capability so much as her acceptance that she needs to kill and taking somebody out. Jericho's character and his daughter, it seemed kind of weak, which is how his reaction was as well. Maybe they could have built it out a tad more, because having her basically as a plant in this wrestling group makes some great sense for the story, but their connection seemed weak and he got over her death pretty quickly. And speaking of connection, Misbehave and Enigma. It was sad when he was taken out, but I didn't really understand her reaction. Again, maybe I missed some dialogue somewhere, but her acting was great. It's a great reaction as far as that goes, but story-wise, I didn't really see enough of their connection to make sense how much more deeply this death had affected her. And finally, the ending. Now, it is very cheesy, but as for myself, I accepted it as a silly, almost cliffhanger of sorts, similar to the end of Cabin in the Woods. Something very unbelievable, but still fun. I would love to see that match, even though it pushes the reality within this film a little bit too far. But ultimately, it doesn't really take away from the film. Actually, none of these issues really do. They are simply minor aspects which kind of stood out. Other than that, let me go ahead and take this banner down. Now that the spoilery stuff is done. Sure, there are some small issues with this film, those few items that I brought up, but they are very minor and don't really take away from the film, because even with those minor issues, this one was a lot of bloody, action-packed, creepy fun, which even a non-wrestling fan can find to be more than worth checking out. And speaking of checking out, thanks for checking out this latest video here for Dark Match, which at the time of this video is on Shudder, AMC Plus, and Paid Rental. It's worth sitting down to, even if you're not a wrestling fan. But what about you? Both you wrestling fans and non-wrestling fans, go ahead and sound off in the comments of what you thought about this film if you checked it out. I know this may not be everybody's cup of tea, but what worked for you, what didn't work for you, are you a fan or not? Anyways, that's all I've got for this one. Thanks for coming by and sticking around to the end, as it really does help out quite a bit, as just giving me a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and hitting subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet, and hitting that bell icon to get notifications when I put up new content, which is 1 to 3 times a week. That way you can hop in that first hour and really help that algorithm share my stuff around. Anyways, that's all I got. Thanks again for coming by, and I will see you in the next one.